In a recent video, I said the following. A guy named Tim Newman, the cousin of well-known musician Randy Newman, whose biggest claim to fame is his contribution to Disney's Toy Story. You dissed Randy Newman, bro. You know nothing about music, entertainment, or pop culture history. And dozens more Randy Newman fans let me have it. Here's my personal favorite, which YouTube hid automatically until I manually approved it. Randy Newman's greatest claim to fame was a song in Toy Story? What are you, a total asshole? Why would anyone listen to anything you say about music when you obviously don't know your ass from your elbow? Douche nozzle. And this video sucks. What else but rednecks? I get why so many people were upset. For those who are true fans of Randy Newman and have bought his albums, and maybe even seen him perform live, distilling his life's work down to Toy Story would be insulting. Calling me a douche nozzle seems like a bit much, but okay, point taken. We'll tackle the question of Newman's legacy later in this video, but first, we need to understand a few things about his musical roots, why he got banned from the radio in 1977, and how Randy Newman went from being called a pop music gadfly to becoming one of the most sought-after composers in Hollywood. Unbeknownst to many, and certainly unbeknownst to me up until about a week ago, Randy Newman's family is basically Hollywood royalty. Newman's own parents weren't composers, but between 3 uncles, 2 cousins, and Randy Newman himself, the Newman family has collectively racked up over 90 Academy Award nominations for their musical work. And on top of that, the family has collectively won 12 statues. 2 of those statues and 20 of those nominations belong to Randy Newman, which is nothing short of astounding. And yet somehow he still has a long way to go if he wants to catch up to his uncle Alfred, who, by the way, famously composed this catchy tune. The list of films that Randy Newman and his family have left their musical mark on is far too long to list here, but here are some you definitely know. And let's not forget the many Disney Pixar animated films that Randy Newman has scored, and his cousin Thomas has also done a few. Suffice it to say that just about everyone has heard music that the Newman family either composed or conducted. And before we stop talking about Randy Newman's family, shout out to Tim Newman, Randy's other cousin who is not a composer, but he directed some of the most iconic music videos back in the day, including ZZ Top's Eliminator trilogy and Randy Newman's own music video for I Love L.A. Longtime Randy Newman fans, such as the people who were yelling at me in the comments of that other video, will tell you that Newman's career goes far beyond Toy Story, and, of course, they're absolutely right. Newman released his self-titled debut album in 1968 to strong critical reviews. And that's about it. Nobody was buying his record. According to Rhino, the catalog division of Warner Music Group, there is a rumor that Newman's label, Warner Brothers, offered a trade-in deal to customers who had bought Newman's album. So if they didn't like it, they could trade it in for something they did like from the Warner Brothers catalog. Or at least, so the story goes. Several years and several albums later, Newman would joke that all of his records combined had sold about as many copies as James Taylor's last album sold in Des Moines, Iowa. Up until he released his album Little Criminals in 1977, Newman's career as a solo artist was a struggle. He didn't sell a lot of records, and outside of a relatively small fan base, the general public had pretty much no idea who he was. But as a songwriter during that time, Randy Newman was killing it. In the 1960s, Dusty Springfield, Peggy Lee, and Jackie DeShannon, among others, all recorded songs written by Newman. In 1970, Three Dog Night took Newman's song Mama Told Me Not to Come to #1 on the Billboard charts, and even today, most people still have no idea that Newman wrote it. Harry Nilsson liked Randy Newman's songwriting so much that in 1970, he recorded an entire album of nothing but his favorite Randy Newman songs. And in the decades since Newman first started writing music, one of his earliest works, I Think It's Going to Rain Today, has been covered by dozens of artists. It's been sung by everyone from Barbra Streisand to UB40 to Leonard Nimoy, of all people. But for regular listeners, those who discovered and fell in love with Newman's music stumbled upon something completely unexpected. What they found was a different kind of storytelling that was often biting and cynical, offering veiled commentaries on human nature and various aspects of life as we know it. To put it mildly, it was a wild departure from radio-friendly singers like James Taylor and John Denver. Newman wrapped his music in satire, with lyrics often sung from the perspective of what literary types call the unreliable narrator, which is probably best described as a character who doesn't realize he's the problem. In 1972, Newman's album Sail Away featured a title track that, on the surface, is the kind of charming tune that a couple might dance to in a quietly romantic moment. But when you listen carefully, the lyrics tell the story of a slave trader who was enticing a group of Africans to get on his boat and sail away to America, crossing the mighty ocean into Charleston Bay, which at one time was the largest slave port in North America. In 1974, Newman released his album Good Old Boys, and the very first track was a song called What Else But Rednecks. Newman once described the song to a live audience as guaranteed to be offensive to black and white, Jew and Gentile. And if you weren't in on the joke, if you didn't know that it was Newman's trademark style to sing not as himself, but as a character, no matter how ugly, then yes, you could and probably would call it offensive. Fans of Randy Newman in the 1970s were well acquainted with his satirical takes on various segments of society. Newman's fan base was small, but they were loyal, and more importantly, they knew what they were getting when they listened to Randy Newman's music. And then, Newman released his album Little Criminals in 1977, which featured a song titled Short People. For just about any American who is old enough to remember the late 70s, Short People is one of those songs that you can start singing along with instantly, even if you're not a Randy Newman fan, and even if you haven't heard the song in 40 years. And between 1977 and 1978, Short People became a subject of national conversation. But not for the reasons Newman had hoped. With the exception of the song's bridge, which we'll discuss shortly, the lyrics to Short People read like a bigoted rant about people who are short. They got no reason to live, they got little hands, little feet, and all the rest. But boy oh boy, was it a catchy tune. When the song started climbing the charts in the fall of 1977, the reaction was sharply divided, as one might expect. Radio stations were flooded with calls requesting the song. Listeners thought it was hilarious and fun to sing along with. And when those radio stations weren't getting requests for Short People, they were fielding complaints from angry listeners demanding that the song be taken off the air. As the song's popularity grew, so did the controversy. Those who were well acquainted with Newman's musical style spoke up to defend Short People. They explained to journalists that the song was simply satire, and Newman was just pointing out how silly it is to be prejudiced against another human being. And based on their knowledge of Newman's frequent use of third-party narrators in his songs, it seemed like a completely logical conclusion, and the line was repeated over and over. Short People was satire, a musical indictment of prejudice. Newman himself accepted this explanation and ran with it. And even today, nearly 50 years later, it seems that most Randy Newman fans still believe that Short People is a satirical argument against judging others unfairly. But Newman came clean in a 1993 interview when Bob Costas asked him this.
Was it like some people thought, this sort of grand put down of prejudice in general by selecting the absurdity of prejudice against short people, or was it just some quirky song that you thought was funny?
And Newman, who we all know is a jokester, gave a completely straight-faced, serious answer.
It was that. I lied at the time, because I was against the wall, and said, it's about prejudice. But I mean, there isn't any prejudice. All it was it amused me that someone would be that berserk on the subject.
And in case there's any doubt about whether he really meant it, Newman said the same thing in 2011 during an Australian radio interview.
You know, I was interviewed by people who said, well, the song, it's about prejudice, isn't it? And I'd say, oh, yeah, it's about prejudice. But it wasn't about anything. It was about, I needed an up song, and the guy's nuts. There's no cabal against people less than average height. All it was that, but okay, it's about prejudice.
So, despite whatever he said publicly at the time of the song's popularity, Randy Newman wrote Short People for the most Newman reason of all. He thought it was funny. To Newman, the thought of someone gnashing his teeth over people's height, or lack of it, was pure comedy. And perhaps wanting to soften the mean-spirited words of this absurd, unreliable narrator in his song, Newman added some redeeming lyrics to the bridge, asserting that short people are just the same as you and I, that all men are brothers until the day they die. It's a wonderful world. This lovely declaration of equality and brotherhood almost seems to give the listener permission to sing along with the rest of the lyrics. But that was also just part of the joke.
And that was entirely it. I had no larger motive. I wasn't saying, look, they're just the same as we are. I did say that in the song, but I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Short People reached its peak chart position of number 2 in early 1978 despite sparking widespread outrage. The backlash was severe enough that radio stations in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and elsewhere took the song out of rotation. Newspaper headlines cried out that the song had been banned, but at least some of the radio stations claimed that they hadn't banned it at all. They said that their decision to not play the song anymore was simply the result of researching what their listeners wanted to hear, and apparently, they did not want to hear Short People. David Rosenthal, a writer for the Associated Press, penned a widely circulated article that explained his view of the song as a man who was 5 feet, 4 inches tall. He said that he used to like Randy Newman, and that he had even interviewed Newman once. Rosenthal wrote the following, which sums up what a lot of short people were already experiencing. Short people may be satire, but most of the world doesn't realize it, and I am getting a little sick of tall folks humming it when I walk into the room. Indeed, nobody was going around singing that short people are just the same as you and I. The opening lyric, that short people got no reason to live, had become such a ubiquitous punchline that a lawmaker in Maryland tried to get the song banned from every commercial radio station in the state. That lawmaker was 5 foot 5 inch Isaiah Dixon. His intentions were noble, but ultimately, the Maryland Attorney General concluded that Dixon's proposal was a violation of the First Amendment. The uproar over the song even resulted in Newman's life being threatened before a concert in Memphis. The details are fuzzy, but Newman himself recounted the story in 2011. He said that his manager calmed his fears by claiming that the Carpenters got death threats all the time. It was no big deal. Newman went on stage and performed, later learning that his manager had made the whole thing up. Randy Newman's feelings about the success of Short People were mixed. On the one hand, he was selling records like never before. Newman had always wanted commercial success, and he had finally struck gold. Literally. Little Criminals flew off the shelves, selling over 750,000 copies, certifying it gold, more than all of his previous albums combined. But at the same time, as he has said many times to newspapers, to Bob Costas and others, he was genuinely surprised by the public backlash. To him, it was incredibly obvious that the song was a joke, that nobody could ever think like the character in his song. However, it had become clear that Newman's song was doing real harm, maybe not to most people, but to some people. And it wasn't just short adults like Rosenthal, the AP reporter, who felt the sting. Online comments from today's Gen X adults tell how Short People was used to torment them when they were children. Newman has never felt that he should have to apologize for his work, but he wanted to address the controversy publicly, which he did during a 1978 appearance on Saturday Night Live.
And I just wanted to say to the people that are really offended by it,
Over the years, Newman would come to regret his biggest hit. In 2003, he told a Virginia newspaper, the Freelance Star, "It was too bad that was my one big hit, a novelty record like the Chipmunks did. It was a hit that did me no good, that did me harm, a bad break." And in 2004, he said this to documentary filmmaker John Ronson.
If you're going to have a hit, it's like I Was Punished. It's the worst kind of hit you could have. It was like Noisy Money, and it was, people were throwing darts at my, at parties, they throw pies at my picture, and burning the album.
And years later, in a 2016 interview with performing songwriter, Newman stopped short of apologizing for short people. But he did acknowledge that people had been hurt by it. He told the publication, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, "I almost regret nothing that I've written, but you could make a case for short people. Of course I didn't mean it, but it doesn't do any good if someone is going into an office every day and gets ribbed about being short, or, 'Mom, I don't want to go to school today. This damn song,' you know." The short people controversy faded, and in 1983, Newman released Trouble in Paradise, which included what is now one of his most beloved songs. I Love LA is a staple in Los Angeles sports arenas to this day, despite how the song takes some obvious and some not so obvious jabs at LA life. It was also in the 80s that Hollywood came calling, and Hollywood, it turns out, was a much better fit. Newman found that in some ways, scoring films was easier than writing songs, and it paid considerably better than putting out records that usually failed to catch on beyond his most loyal fans. Composing music for Hollywood was kind of the Newman family business, and Randy had finally joined it. His uncle Alfred had spent decades doing just that at 20th Century Fox. His cousin Thomas was building his own film composing career at the same time, as was his cousin David. Throughout the 1980s and into the 90s, Newman wrote original music and scored film after film, collecting Oscar nominations for Ragtime, The Natural, Parenthood, and more. But he didn't win any of them. Not yet. In 1995, something happened that nobody saw coming, least of all Randy Newman. Pixar was making its first feature film. It was a computer-animated movie about toys, and they needed a composer. Alan Menken would have been an obvious choice considering all of the incredible work he had done for Disney. James Horner, Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri, all were A-list composers who had done animation, but they never got the call. According to Toy Story director John Lasseter, Randy Newman was the first and only choice. On paper, this seems like an odd decision. Not only had Newman never scored a children's film, he had also never scored an animated film. But Pixar knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted Newman partly for his warm Americana sound. They were worried that the computer animation might feel too cold without an orchestra underneath it. But they also wanted him for his bite. As one Disney executive later put it, Pixar was almost the anti-Disney. They didn't want princess movies or magic or musicals. They wanted something different. Newman later recalled his reaction to getting the call. "It started a terror in my stomach," he said. "It was so different from what I'd done." Toy Story opened on November 22, 1995 in a wide release across North America. Its opening weekend gross of just over $29 million was enough to make it the #1 film in the country, and that means roughly 6.7 million people heard Randy Newman's music in the first 3 days alone. By the time Toy Story finished its theatrical run, it had grossed $191 million in the U.S. alone and over $237 million worldwide. Critics were unanimous in their praise, and the film holds a 100% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes to this day. Newman's score and songs were specifically cited as essential to the film. Director John Lasseter said Newman's music delivered the emotional underpinning for every scene. Tom McDougall, Executive Vice President of Music at Walt Disney Studios, went further. "I would say Randy is as important as Tom Hanks or Tim Allen. If we didn't have his music in there, you would feel it for sure. and you might not even want to make it without him. But the theatrical run was just the beginning. Then came home video, endless childhood rewatching, 4 sequels, most recently Toy Story 5, which is in theaters right now, and of course there's Disney+. In other words, Toy Story didn't just introduce one audience to Newman. It introduced several generations. In a 2011 interview, Newman himself acknowledged what Toy Story had become.
Because certainly the most noteworthy things, meaning that the things that have been noticed by the most people, those are the Pixar movies. I mean, there's no way I had 8-year-olds as part of my audience. It's not that kind of thing.
Yes, the things that have been noticed by the most people. This is exactly what I meant when I said that Newman's biggest claim to fame was his contribution to Toy Story. I didn't call it the only thing he's ever done, nor did I say it's the best thing he's ever done. It's just the biggest. I think the way people see Randy Newman is going to be mostly based on 2 things. Number 1, how old you are, and number 2, how big a fan you are of his solo music. Younger people who have never heard Short People and don't go to LA Dodgers games probably don't even know who Randy Newman is until you say the words Toy Story. As for the Randy Newman fans of the world, they're not wrong. If you judge him by craft, influence, songwriting, and originality, Toy Story is only one chapter in a much bigger career. But if you judge claim to fame by what the largest number of people actually recognize, then Toy Story is impossible to beat. Despite what some commenters from that previous video seem to believe, I'm definitely old enough to remember Short People as well as anyone. But I've never called myself a Randy Newman fan, so when I needed one sentence to contextualize him in that ZZ Top video, I pointed to Toy Story. I made that choice because if you compare the number of people who know about Randy Newman, the songwriter, versus the people who know Toy Story, well, it probably looks like the size relationship between Earth and the Sun. Newman clearly does not want to be remembered as the Short People guy. And when NPR asked Newman what he thinks about being remembered as the Toy Story guy, he gave the only response that matters. I want them to know other movies and that I write songs, you know. When I step off, I think it'll be the songs that are mentioned more. You know, when the obituary in the Courier-Journal is there, I think it'll be singer-songwriter. But I'm not sure. I'll never know.